Police releasing video of protesters in Columbus, Ohio. They say attacked a disabled man's car. The 58-year-old with cerebral palsy was driving home when he encountered a crowd of protesters. This is just one example of a disturbing trend of attacks, some even targeting pregnant women, new mothers, and the elderly. Correspondent Alex Hogan is taking a closer look for us tonight. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening, Shannon. Disturbing attacks, among them today an elderly New Jersey man beaten in a cemetery and a pregnant Philadelphia woman shot in the head. An uptick in crime in some of the country's largest cities and recent violence targeting some of the more vulnerable. Like in the Bronx, a man threw a 64-year-old to the ground trying to take his necklace, and this man putting a 64-year-old woman in a chokehold to steal her purse. Violence between partners climbing too. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, calls for help increased by 9% during the pandemic. Among recent attacks, crimes against pregnant women across the nation. One man in the Bronx attacking his ex-girlfriend, choking and stabbing her in front of their child. In Minneapolis earlier this month, police responded to 2 separate shootings of pregnant women. The Minnesota Department of Justice forming a new Twin Cities violent crime task force last week to help reduce recent violence, announcing in part the goal of this task force is not to flood our communities with law enforcement, but rather to leverage law enforcement's collective resources. In New York yesterday, Mayor Bill de Blasio signing new police reform bills as shootings continue to spike in the city and tensions increase between police and the public.
There is a lot of animosity towards the police, and we're feeling it not just in the protests when these anarchists take over it, but on the streets, on the street corners. 4
NYPD officers are recovering after yesterday's clashes with protesters on the Brooklyn Bridge, and some suspects have been arrested. De Blasio calling the attacks unacceptable.
I've said it many times. There's no situation in which it's acceptable to attack a police officer, period.
Chief Monahan says that morale in the NYPD is as low as it's been, and still within just the last day, police responded to 7 more shootings and taking care of 12 shooting victims. Shannon?